Welcome to our session today, which is keeping education safe and leveraging Fastvue for effective internet monitoring and reporting. And the whole focus today is that we talk to the serious topic and the concerning topic of keeping education safe, making sure students and pupils, etc., are safe, and that everything that's done in an educational environment is safe. Renaissance have partnered with Fastvue, and we're delighted to introduce Fastvue. We're delighted to have Simon May, who's a General Manager for UK and Europe, who's going to be talking to us this afternoon. And what we're going to do is go through the session, try to understand the issues, the challenges, etc., in relation to keeping education safe, and also to look and understand how Fastvue may help you in relation to those. There are a couple of pieces of housekeeping I'd like to address. First thing is all attendees are muted for the session. The session is being recorded, as are a number of people who are unable to attend, and it'll be made available afterwards. And then if anybody has any questions, if they want to send them to myself, and I'll take the questions and we'll raise them, and we'll have a conversation with Simon, and let's discuss this in any queries that you may have. Please make it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions or anything, any areas of topics you'd like to talk to, let's raise them, send them to myself, and we'll look to address them and answer them as best as possible. And if in that way, then it'll be the best opportunity for you guys. So without further ado, I'll pass you on to Simon, and let's, as I say, just keep the questions coming. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Renaissance, for setting this session up. As Michael said, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what it takes to keep children safe online in the education setting. So in terms of an agenda, Michael's introduced me, but my name is Simon May. I'm the General Manager for Fastvue here in the UK and Europe. I'm going to talk you through what Fastvue is. I'm then going to give you the challenges, so set some context around what makes Fastvue relevant. And that largely sits around legislation and guidance that's handed down from governments. Now, Ireland is slightly different to the UK, and I'll talk about those differences and touch upon what Ireland can expect in the future and why it's a good idea to start thinking about solutions like Fastvue now, so you're ready for when that legislation lands. I'll then give you a brief demo of Fastvue so you can see what I'm talking about. And after that, I think it will all make sense. And then finally some conclusions and then questions. So that's the agenda. So what is Fastvue? So Fastvue is a piece of software which customers download. It takes the complex log information that's produced by the major firewalls that you have here on the right of the screen, and it turns that into easy to use reports and alerts. So fundamentally what it does is it does the work of an analyst who would take that information, create very, very complex queries to pull out detailed information around what students and staff, employees are up to on the internet, and can pull back as far back in time as the log data is available for, and also create alerts for stopping or for being made aware of when staff or students are doing things in real time. And I'll show you that in the demo. So it monitors internet usage for self-harm and extremes behavior, which is what we're concerned about in schools. It's another layer of security around detecting insider threats and the like, and also can measure workplace productivity against the firewall settings. And then it allows IT teams to also have another layer of data which allows them to troubleshoot and fix what's going on with the firewall. So that's a brief overview of what Fastvue is. We're in about 600 schools across the UK, about 6,000 globally. Been in the market for over 20 years, so very well established, a very stable piece of software that's well regarded and well used across the world. So let me just set some context around why this is relevant. Now, if anybody on the webinar are parents, this will be something which you're all too familiar with and aware of. But there's a huge amount of change, an arms race, I call it, where people that are attempting to control access, or at least be aware of what students are accessing on the internet, be aware of it and act on it. Meanwhile, the landscape is constantly changing. So this is just a handful of the newspaper stories which have appeared in the last few weeks in Ireland alone. If you take globally, obviously, it's a factor of a million more. So as you can see, this is a huge current issue. Educators struggle because the internet provides both an opportunity to give students access to very valuable content, but also gives them obviously access to stuff which we'd rather they didn't see. And if they did, we'd like to be aware of it so we can act on it from a safeguarding perspective. So just to back that point up, there's some amazing statistics that are produced, and these are all from the last 6 months. So I just want to pull you to the one at the bottom, really, rather than read the slide out to you. Some 71% of parents stopped supervising internet use by their children after the age of 14, yet 72% of all internet-related missing children cases involve children who are 15 years of age or older. And what does that mean? That means at the very time when parents think that their children are kind of self-sufficient and able to, if you like, self-regulate what's useful for them on the internet, is the very time when those children become the most vulnerable, which is an interesting kind of crossing of what two kind of assumptions one might make. So it's really crucially important that every single signal that's available out there to help parents, teachers, safeguarding leads, heads of individual schools, they have access to the right information at the right time that allows them to make sure that their children aren't being exposed to information or content that they shouldn't be, but critically, if they are, that they are made aware of it so they can act on it. And again, when I show you the Fastvue tool, that should become clear, and I can talk you through some real life examples. So just to set the context around legislation and guidance, in Ireland, you have various acts and legislation there. You have the Child Protection Procedure for Primary and Post-Primary Schools, which was revised a couple of years back. The main piece is the Children First Act 2015, which drives schools and educators into various auditing, of which the Child Safeguarding Statement is one. And then you have the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act 2022, which really covers all media, including online. But obviously online seems to be the junior, if you like, partner in there, although it's clearly the one that's changing and growing and is most relevant as each day goes by. On top of that, in the UK, we have the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidelines, or KICSI, as people call it, of which there are the 2023 and just recently released in September of this year, and this last week is the 2024 version. Now, these are critical because these are coming down the line. The legislation, which is in the UK, it's slated to come down the line into Ireland at some point. Now, what are the major differences? So the major differences are that simply having some filtering in place, i.e. a firewall, is no longer enough. So under the current legislation in Ireland and under the previous legislation previous to last year in the UK, simply having a firewall was enough. IT functions were able to filter out categories of websites which they didn't want their children to get to and block, and they were able to manage that locally, and that was fine. But there wasn't really any intelligence generated from the firewall that allowed the schools to either be aware of what kids have been looking at or prevent them from doing things in real time that they might be trying to attempt now. So what the legislation brought into place last year was the obligation on schools to have to be able to report on what every individual in the school is doing and has done online. And that includes staff as well as students. So that further was bolstered by saying that all staff need to be trained on filtering and monitoring. Now, obviously, that's open to some level of interpretation. But what our tool tries to do is to make that the ability to create reports as easy as possible, so you don't need an IT team. And then you're inherently trained on the filtering and monitoring if you have the ability to run the reports. In the latest legislation, in the 2024, that doubles down on two areas. One is the cybersecurity standards, which mean that schools now have to adhere to the government cybersecurity obligations, which covers all businesses, frankly, not just all businesses that trade over the internet, not just schools and educators. So that's potentially a rather large leap for schools to go from where they are today to being able to comply with that. And the second thing that came in with the latest regulations is the focus on data protection. So whereas previously it was advisory, that schools had to be aware of where their data was held and make sure the rules and regulations and policies are in place to protect that data, now they have an obligation to effectively have GDPR in place and make sure that their data is absolutely protected under GDPR rules, and which means that data sovereignty becomes a consideration. So that rather makes a lot of schools analyze the options they have available to them around where their data is stored. And bear in mind, internet usage data can be incredibly sensitive. Make sure where that is stored and so that they are making sure it's secure and safe. So that's the legislation. As I say, the KICSI regulations, or keeping children safe in education, aren't yet in Ireland, but every indication is that the legislation will be lifted and dropped into Ireland, and Irish schools would have to comply with that. But there's always the question of, okay, the legislation doesn't obligate you to go that extra mile in Ireland at the moment, but is it the right thing to do? Is it something that schools should be considering anyway? That's where the customers that we have in Ireland right now, that's where their head is at. So trying to get ahead of the obligations and try and do the right thing for the kids. So the requirements really boil down to having giving schools the ability to allow non-technically gifted people to create these usage reports. Without a tool like Fastvue, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for a non-technical person to pull out the information that they need. Staff need to be made instantly aware, so they need to have some kind of alerting system in place where there is potential online safeguarding or technical concerns. So instantly aware where a child is searching for something that they shouldn't be, or where the network is not behaving in a way which means there may be a potential breach for a child to get through or for somebody to get into the network. The format is important because the format has to be shared. The reports have to be shared across multiple people and also made potentially available externally. So the monitoring data has to be in a format the staff can understand. So just producing an Excel spreadsheet with the list of all the sites visited isn't good enough anymore. And what's really critical is the ability to trace a behavior back to an individual, including guest accounts. So anybody that hits the school network as a guest, you have to have the ability to trace activity back to them, not just have the fact that somebody somewhere tried to search something. You have to have the ability to trace it back again. So it kind of brings into play wider solutions around authentication, that kind of thing. The systems have to now identify the device name or the IP address, as well as time and date of attempted access for a search term or content being blocked. So just blocking it, as I said before, no longer enough. Schools now have to have the ability to identify who tried to do what and when. And then just to bang home that point about the latest regulations, schools really have to comply with GDPR and Data Protection Act 2018 by the end of 2024. So lots of changes in an environment where IT isn't necessarily a core skill of the people that are responsible for making sure the schools are obligated. So a real opportunity there to kind of leverage tools like Fastvue to bring a simple solution to their challenge. So that's the context. What I'd like to do now is to just briefly show you Fastvue in action. So I'm going to have to just unshare my screen and then reshare it with the Fastvue tool. Bear with me 2 seconds while I just pull that up.
I'm waiting to see if your phrase non-technically gifted people comes to fruition here, Simon, while you're doing that.
Well, straight away, it's nice primary colors. It's very easy. There are 3 main elements to the tool. The primary ones that are used by schools day in, day out are reports and alerts, which are in these tabs at the top. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to run a report, and you can see very quickly the kind of data that Fastvue can collect on a student, and then straight away that'll be obvious just how useful that is in making sure that student is not doing anything they shouldn't be. And bear in mind, this isn't about Big Brother. This isn't about keeping on top of every child's click so you can be aware of what they're up to. This is about an easy way of being made aware of where there's a potential safeguarding concern. So like I said, there are two main bits that schools use: reports and alerts. The dashboard gives schools real-time monitoring of what's going on in their network from a user perspective, not from a bits and bytes and capacity and throughput and bandwidth perspective, which is what you get from your firewall. So first thing I'm going to do is run a report. And again, imagine that I'm in a school, and the kind of typical scenario is that a child has turned up displaying something which gives the school cause for concern. One of the things they want to go and do is investigate whether that child has been looking for anything on the internet which backs up their reason for having a concern. So I've got into reports, super simple. I've got 3 choices: an overview report, a user report, which is the individual user, an activity report. I'm going to run a user report because I'm looking for the information on a user. And I want to see the internet usage on this character here. And he turned up last Monday the 2nd with whatever behavior it was that made us want to go and see what he was up to. So I'm going to run a report. Every report I run, I can also schedule. So if this particular child, you wanted to make sure that the person responsible for his safety within the school had a daily email that explained what he'd been up to online, then you can schedule that daily, weekly, monthly, and get that sent to that person without them needing to come back into the tool, which again, just adds to that ease of use. Once the report is set up, it just runs and generates an email with a PDF or a CSV file with the information in it. So I've run the report, and I'll roll through this, and those of you that maybe have children, this can be very interesting in terms of imagining that this was your child. So we can see when Roger was online. And again, quite useful in the school. If Roger was hitting the school network at midnight, something's interesting is going on, you might want to go investigate. So the departments, the authentication is generally pulled from a tool like Active Directory, which obviously puts the audience into various buckets. As a demo, we just have the single bucket of sales. Then we can see all the sites that Roger's been on. Everywhere where a little green arrow pops up next to something, you can click through and get more detail on that. We're collecting the report. Standard report gives us the domains that Roger has been on. We also have a thing called Site Clean. Now, Site Clean is important because if you don't have something like Site Clean in place, if Roger was to visit a site that had content syndicated to it, then you would have that reported as a separate URL. So it might look like Roger's been looking at something he shouldn't have, but in reality, he's been looking at a perfectly innocent site. It's just had content from somewhere else. So you can pull out, this pulls out those situations where Roger unwittingly pulled down content that he wasn't looking for, but you still get the information just in case it's something you need to look at. So we have a thing called Site Clean. So these are all the sites that Roger's been on. I remember from the thousands of students that are sitting going through the network, we've pulled out the data on one student's activity in one 24-hour period. The query required to do that without a tool like Fastvue would be extensive. So they're all the sites. These are all the categories as defined by the firewall. Firewalls define every website into a category. It's a constantly evolving and updating thing. And this tells you where Roger's been spending his time. You would expect probably for a child environment, social web and YouTube to be the most active. These are all, again, dynamic and clickable for anybody who needs to click through and see the detail behind that. We can see the applications that Roger's been using. For some of the firewalls, that includes ChatGPT and the ability to interrogate the ChatGPT prompts that Roger had been looking at. I'm using the WatchGuard version for the demo that doesn't have it yet, but we're working on it. Or WatchGuard are working on it. And then from a school safeguarding perspective, this is kind of like the really interesting stuff. So these are the safeguarding search terms which Roger has attempted to search during this 24-hour window. So Roger turned up that day looking unwell, unkempt, whatever it might be. Oh, guess what? He Googled how to kill yourself. Clearly in a school environment, that's something you might want to act on. So that's kind of where the real usefulness of it comes. We also capture all of his searches. And again, you might find things in here which aren't in the keywords, in the safeguarding keyword lists, which you could use to update that, which keeps this live and relevant to whatever setting the school is in. So these are the safeguarding search terms Roger searched in that 24-hour period. We can drill through on either the search term itself and see if anybody else was searching for it. We can drill through on the category and see what other search terms in the category were searched across the school and so on. So you can really start to drill and get a lot of depth of information here. We have an API out to YouTube, which means you can pull down the videos that contain the safeguarding search terms that he's looked at on YouTube. Again, taking the example, he's looked at drugs and he's looked at ISIS. So again, this is demo. It's designed to make a point, but clearly there is something to be looking at here in the case of this child that's turned up to school. And then we run through all the other firewall categories, but pulling out just Roger's activity in this 24-hour window. So as you can see, very, very deep information and very quickly evident why this is useful. Oops. And very quickly evident why this is useful in a safeguarding setting, all the way down to the block sites he's attempted to get to. And again, you can drill through and see time of day and all other information relevant to that. So that's how we run a user report. You're able also to run reports across an entire estate. So if I go to internet usage, and I'll quickly run the report for that, the same 2 days, or the same day rather. So I'll roll through this. So we can quickly see all the users and who's been on and when, and drill through on that if need be. The departments, the sites they've been on. And again, you can drill through and see exactly who's been on which site, on what days, how long for. And then if I go through to the safeguarding search terms, we can now see all the safeguarding search terms which are searched across the school, but now with the name against each one. So typically, the person in charge of the safeguarding within the school, in the UK that's called a designated safeguarding lead, will get this report configured and sent to them daily, and it sits in their inbox. They go back and refer to it in the event that they have to, but they have a daily record of all the activity that might be relevant from a safeguarding perspective, arriving just in case. Again, we have the YouTube videos, now the name against each one, and so on through all the other categories of the name. And again, everything drillable and clickable, so you can drill down and see more of what's going on. So that's the reports. The activity report, I won't run on a report, but that gives you the ability to basically configure whatever report is relevant to you down to whatever you need to run the report on. So highly configurable, very customizable. And every report that you run, you can schedule. So the next time I'm going to show you the keywords, because the keywords drive obviously what appears in the safeguarding search terms in the reports, but it also covers what appears in the alerts. So I need to show the keywords before I show the alerts, otherwise it won't make so much sense. So the tool comes with thousands of keywords in it, broken down into these 4 groups. If I open up extremism as an example, you can see that there are screen after screen after screen of these. A few things to note. The keywords have exclusions. So the word Remington is the name of a gun. It's also the name of a street. If a child was to search for Remington Street, it won't generate an alert because we've asked it to exclude the word street from the search, and the child won't go off to a site which is deemed to be a safeguarding category risk. But if they type in, how do I buy a Remington, you will get the alert. So we try very much to remove as much noise as possible from the alerts, so you're not getting alerts on anything which might contain something which is deemed to be a safeguarding risk. Add keywords means that the school can customize it, or the customer can customize it whatever they want. And also add your own keyword group. So we see in the school settings, schools adding lists of teachers' names, for instance. It's rarely good news when children start to Google teachers' names and where they live and the like. So they add those as keywords and can be aware of a situation where a kid is searching for a teacher. We had one school in the south of England, and the headmaster's house was vandalized one evening or one night when the family were all asleep. And the next day, somebody thought it would be worthwhile if they searched using Fastvue for if anybody had searched for the headmaster's address, and sure enough, somebody had. It's publicly available information. They were able to find the house, and then the school was able to act on it. So it has real life uses, and because we are able to analyze log data from the past, you can pull up any internet activity from any student as long as you have the log files for. So that can be as far back as you need. So they were able to find the kid that had clearly decided to vandalize the headmaster's house using Fastvue. So that's the keywords. Now the keywords, they drove what appeared in the reports. They also drive what appears or what can be alerted on. So we'll have the alerts are real-time emails that appear as soon as an activity that's been configured occurs. So the alerts tab gives you a list of alerts. If I go to settings and alerts, you can see how an alert is set up and the different kinds of alerts that can be set up. So I will pull up an obvious one. This will send an alert anytime anybody on the network attempts to search for a search term that's in the self-harm keyword group. So I showed you the self-harm keyword group earlier. That will, anytime anybody types anything in there, how do I kill myself, anything like that, then alert will get sent to whoever needs to receive it in real time. So within the time period of the child sat at the computer, the alert will be generated and sent to the inbox of whoever needs to see it. These alerts are fully configurable. If you're particularly worried about Roger, the character I looked at before, you could set an alert specifically for Roger. So anytime Roger types in the search term that's in the self-harm keyword group, that'll fire an alert to whoever needs to see it. So you can really start to be on top of individual risks using the tool if need be. So you can, that's an obvious kind of self-harm. That's an obvious kind of alert anytime it types in a self-harm term. You can also look at behavioral stuff. So if you've got a suspicion that a child is wasting their time, you could, let's say you were worried about that Roger was wasting his time, you could set an alert that tells you anytime Roger spends more than 1 hour in a 4-hour window on an unproductive but allowed website, typically a Facebook, and then you can act on that if you need be. Clearly a lower priority than the self-harm search, but nonetheless a useful one that we have most schools set up once they're using Fastvue. So I've talked you through the reports, I've talked you through the keywords, which drive what appears in the reports, and also the alerts, which is obviously driven also by the keywords. The final thing to show you is just the monitoring piece. So if you have one of the firewalls that we support in place, you will be getting a bunch of access to information around bits and bytes and product and throughput and all the good stuff that the IT team needs to know to make sure their firewall is configured correctly and they have the right size firewall, etc. What we do is we're able to supplement that with user-based information. So real-time information on what's going through your firewall at any point in time. So for instance, all your websites are split down into productivity settings. We can tell you in real time exactly which productivity categories are being accessed now. So if all of a sudden the unproductive line suddenly rose, that might be something we want to look into. And again, it's all dynamic and can be clicked through to analyze. Bandwidth gives you what I call rolling league tables of things. So here are your top most active users right now, your most visited sites right now, and applications and categories, protocols, downloads, etc. This is real time, and this will change obviously as traffic's gone through the firewall, so it changes. Productivity gives an instant overview of what you might want to be looking at from a safeguarding perspective. So you're allowed but unacceptable categories, sites, and users. You're blocked unacceptable categories, sites, users. And remember, this is what's being accessed right now. So this is your real-time information. And like I say, it changes as the activity changes. Allowed and unproductive categories, sites, and users. Blocked unproductive. This can be configured, and anybody that wants to implement Fastvue would have access to our professional services at any time to help you configure it and get it running as you want throughout the lifetime of your relationship with us. And then firewall finally, really more from an IT kind of management perspective, making sure that you've got the firewall configured with the right URLs and right block reasons and devices, sorry, policies, actions, etc. And again, that supplements what you get from your firewall natively. So worth saying, all the stuff that you see in these monitoring screens, you can set up alerts for us. You can set up an alert that says, alert me anytime YouTube becomes my most visited website in a 15-minute window, or no, tell me anytime Kira becomes the most active user. Maybe that she's somebody that is displaying behavior which you want to kind of get on top of. Or equally, you can say, tell me anytime any pupil is generating no data whatsoever, because that means they've switched their device off and have gone rogue to 5G, which in most schools is against the policy. You can tap that kid on the shoulder and ask them what they're up to. So really, really flexible, lots and lots of detail, incredibly easy to use. That's in a nutshell, that is Fastvue. There's other bits and pieces in there around the site clean technology and that kind of thing. But fundamentally, it's a reporting tool which gives super easy access to non-technical people to really complex data to produce super simple and easy to run reports. Right, I will go back to the...
Simon, thank you very much for that. I'll let you catch your breath after that whirlwind tour. I think it was very it was, I must say, I love that phrase, non-technically gifted people. Describes a lot of people, but I think it's really important that you know, technology has been you're talking about a technology, you're talking about a solution to a problem and an issue that actually is relatively easy to implement, to manage, and to understand. Because in an education environment, that you know, I'm sure there's very technically gifted people, but there's certainly other people who need information, and that's what they need. They need the information. They don't need a lesson how to program or whatever it is. And the data you're extracting from the firewalls is quite incredible. just as a personal comment, and it's quite from a Renaissance perspective. We deal with cybersecurity compliance. We come across this all of the time, and people talk about what are things that you have to do and you should do, etc., etc. And to your point there about Kixie and the fact that yes, it may not be legislation in Ireland, but at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with an education environment and children and students and pupils and whatever, um, you have a duty of care. And nobody wants to say, well, yes, I didn't do the right thing because, well, it wasn't legally required. At the end of the day, if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. The
Yeah,
fact that our legislation hasn't caught up with it doesn't mean it's it's something that can be neglected or should be neglected. And what we're seeing out there is people are saying, listen, you know what, they have a duty of care to their pupils, to the students, and to the families, and indeed, oftentimes it's their own children, and they'd like these things done. So that's just a comment that I make, and that we come across all of the time. So while something might not be legislation, if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. So
absolutely.
um, there are a number of questions here. Maybe if I put them to you, and as I say, we're open for questions. If anybody else has any questions, please pass them through to myself. But I have a number of questions that have come through to me. One is saying, well, what's the number one consideration for schools looking to implement an online safeguarding solution?
Sorry, Michael, sorry, repeat that. Sorry. What's the,
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, what's the number one consideration for schools looking to implement an online safeguarding solution?
well, I think in the education sector, there's two primary considerations. Legislation is one, and what you said is absolutely right. Doing the right thing is obviously the right thing to do. But legislation is one, making sure that you are ticking all the boxes for all the relevant parts of the inspections that are going to come your way. The second one is budget. Um, Budget is obviously critical in education settings for all sorts of reasons. And finding a solution which is cost effective and easy to implement and doesn't lock you into maybe an escalating cost is a large consideration, and really ease of use, because in the environment that we work in, I won't touch on that phrase, technically not gifted, but you need the ability for anybody to run a report within a school is really critical, because otherwise they're relying on somebody who has the skills, and that somebody is already going to be stretched doing everything else. So the ability for that person to set a report, schedule it, have it sent automatically is really important. And finding a capability which does that, that takes the weight off the individual, is critical, because schools need to act on this stuff quickly. So, and real time is another issue, is another big thing that I would take. Some of the other solutions out there rely on, I don't know where the people sit, but there are teams of people sat in a room somewhere analyzing screenshots and working out whether it should or shouldn't. Who knows? By the time they've come to a decision, maybe it's too late. Whereas where tools like Fastvue, it's real time, it's quick, and making sure the processes are in place to support that is critical.
Yeah, and as you say, if there's a whole bunch of analysis to be done, yes, it may get done every now and then, but typically it doesn't get done on an ongoing basis. And the ability that you're talking about there for a report to be delivered on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever on a scheduled basis is massively important, because
Absolutely.
I'm not an educator, but I guess people in education, they have a good idea of the type, of some individuals, and they want to keep an eye on them, and this is a way of monitoring them, not interfering with them, but monitoring them for their own protection. A question here is, what are the benefits of a non-premises solution over the cloud-based service that
Yeah.
may or may not be available?
Well, there's clearly a cost element to that, and I keep coming back to cost because that is critical in education. But more importantly than that, data sovereignty. So, with the new rules in KICSI, knowing that your data is sat within your network in your control is one less thing to worry about from a data protection officer perspective. The other tools out there, a lot of them, they're tools that are based abroad. I don't know sometimes where the data is stored, what the obligations are on them for terms of backups, etc. There's the whole issue around data protection is now going to become paramount in schools. And like I say, where you've got information on students' internet activity, it can be very, very sensitive information. So the schools have to make sure that it's in a place that they feel that it's safe and that it meets all the obligations. So I think that'd be my answer to that.
Yeah, and an interesting one there when you talk about data sovereignty. Obviously, Ireland being an EU country, data relating to personally identifiable information, and specifically relating to minors and to children, is something that has to be um, very well protected and very well cared for. Another question here, and it's the last question that I have at the moment, unless any more come in, but it's how long does it take to implement an online safeguarding monitoring environment?
Well, Fastvue, I can talk Fastvue really. Fastvue takes, you can have it implemented within half an hour. So
Okay.
all you need is a virtual machine or a server, or if you've got a small environment with not a lot of users, you can in fact just use a desktop or a laptop to get it running. Up and running in half an hour. It takes about 20 minutes to ingest the first lot of data, and you're up and running. You're away and you go. The things to mainly consider is the storage for your logs, and that depends on the size of the school and the number of reports you're going to need to run. But you can evaluate Fastvue for free, and then work all that out during the evaluation before you move to production. And like I touched on earlier, our professional services will help you throughout that entire process, as if you were a customer. And if you decide to stay with us, fantastic. If you don't, well, no harm done. Thank you for your interest. But yeah, it can be set up very, very, very quickly, and it's a simple executable download. Very, very simple. Comes with all instructions. Most people are able to set it up without the need for our support, and our support really steps in to help with any kind of local configurations or customizations. But it's super, super simple. I can do it. If I can do it, pretty much anyone can do it. There's a Windows and a Linux version, so you're not forced to stay on Windows. And you can host it in the cloud, in your own cloud tenancy, if that's your strategy, and clearly pulling the data from logs which are on premise or cloud-based firewalls. So very, very flexible, very, very quick, very easy. And like I say, evaluation version available from our website, which you can use for 30 days for free off the bat, full functionality.
So in terms of next steps for anybody, they can go to the website, they can download an evaluation version, or indeed they can come to yourself,
Yeah.
or any of the Renaissance team, and we'd be delighted to assist them in any way, shape, or form. Make the introduction. I know we won't get into pricing and costs here, but Simon has talked about budgets, etc. It's not a massively expensive exercise to do, but I think that I think the important thing that I would suggest is the benefits and the risks and the things that it actually covers, and the concerns that it covers off are a huge return on any, and it is quite a small investment on any small investment. So what I would say to anybody is thank you, Simon, very much for doing the session today. I think it's really interesting, and it's also an insight into, certainly in your presentation, insight into the types of things and challenges and risks that we've seen out there in Ireland, and we are all aware of them, and we all see of them. We know of them all the time, but also the types of things that are coming down the line with KIXI or the equivalent of KIXI, whatever we will decide to call it. But listen, no, thank you very much, Simon, and thank you very much to everybody for attending today. As I say, the session will be made available on an on-demand. So if you feel that this is something you'd like to share with anybody, please reach out, share it among your peers or anybody who you believe will be concerned, and drop us a line in Renaissance or indeed Fastvue, and we'd be delighted to follow up. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.